Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today I am filming my December wrap up. Today I noticed that I haven't even thought about filming it or planned it, so I just thought I'd quickly jump on and do it really quickly. So yeah, this is my last wrap up of 2020. I read 9 books, which is fine, I guess. It's not that bad. The month previous, in November, was pretty bad for me, but this month got slightly better. I didn't reach my Goodreads goal. I had 125 as my goal, but I only got to 124, which is fine, but still thought I'd mention that. I think that's pretty much it before I start talking about the books. So the first book I finished in the month was Silverborn by Patricia Briggs. This is either book 5 or 6 in the Mercy Thompson series. I've been binging these for a while now, and the events kind of blur, and my reaction to each individual book kind of blurs, but for the most part I like this one. I haven't really hated a book or disliked it since maybe book 1 was kind of slow for me. But anyways, this series is an urban fantasy series. We follow a mechanic named Mercy Thompson. I'm pretty sure she's half Blackfeet, Native American. So in this world, a bunch of supernatural creatures have started making themselves known to the public, specifically fae and werewolves. There are also vampires and ghosts that exist in this world, but they're still kind of not known. So you have a bunch of supernatural creatures that are out to the public, but that's by no means the main plot of the story, though that does come up in every book. Each book kind of has its own little mystery that Mercy kind of is in the middle of. Yeah, it's very much along the lines of Sookie Stackhouse novels, Harry Dresden novels, but in this particular story it's very fae centric. I actually do remember this one pretty vividly because I ended up really liking some of the elements here. I don't really want to give away too much of the plot because each book, each individual plot for each book is fine, but really what I stay for and what I'm really interested in is seeing how all these supernatural creatures kind of conform or deal with being out to the public, and how the public reacts to them, because you have a bunch of hate groups, and then you also have some civil rights groups advocating for the rights of fae and stuff like that. I just think it's really interesting. That's my favorite part of this whole story, and the characters are pretty cool and distinct and unique. Yeah, these books are pretty chill and relaxing, and I usually read them on audiobook, so I do them when I have chores or when I'm cooking, so I can't really complain. They're fine, they're entertaining, they're fun. They're not Booker Prize winners or anything, but I just want to have fun, and that's what they deliver, so I have a good time. Later on in the month I did read the book after Silverborn, and that was River Marked. Now this one was more focused on Mercy Thompson's upbringing or her background, because she is Native American. A lot of more Native American culture and folklore was put at the forefront, and I'm not Native American, but I do feel that it's always so shady to me when authors use Native American folklore or creatures or that kind of stuff as the main plot, and then they don't feature Native Americans. Fortunately, Patricia Briggs did have quite a few Native American characters in this book. She brought in more, so I do give her kudos to that. But as for the proper representation, I can't give her validity because that's not my place. This story was really fun and great too. I will say that for most of her stories, I feel the third act really comes really quickly, and then it gets squashed really quickly, so pacing when it comes to the conclusion is kind of off. It's a little too quick. Mercy will be in the middle of a mystery and talking to someone, trying to get information, and then all of a sudden she's fighting the big bad of the book, right? But I can kind of excuse the pacing. Doesn't really ruin the story completely for me. It's just something that kind of throws me a little bit, but for the most part it's fine. Yeah, Mercy has always been the one Native American character throughout the entire series up to this point, but the author did bring in more for this Native American centric story, and I also do the main relationship. I don't have a problem with it, and I do seeing them interact. So after I read Silverborn, I finished Sovereign Sacrifice by Elise Kobuk. This is the 4th book in the Vortex Chronicles series, which I've talked about a few times on my channel because I've also been binging this series. This is like a sequel series to an earlier series that she wrote, which was Heir Awakens. This takes place like a generation after that, so I can't really give away too much. But in this series, we have the crown princess who has not grown up with her father and her mother, the king and queen, for political reasons, and she's kind of grown up within the country but kind of very like distantly from like the capital. She's been raised by a group of people that don't really respect the kingdom, the monarchy, and in this world people have like elemental abilities like fire, wind, earth, so on, and she at the beginning of the book hasn't come into those abilities, and she's getting really nervous until she finally gets her powers, and they are not like everyone else's. She doesn't have the same elemental abilities that everyone else does. She has something completely different, and that kind of sets her off on this adventure that really goes in different places. I guess you can say I've been disappointed in this series because I don't really like where this series has gone. In the original like Heir Awakens series, that was very like confined plot to a specific country, and in this series she's kind of like expanded the world and expanded everything, and I feel like we haven't had time to digest it. Like I feel like she's kind of like really trying to get to the ending and not taking enough time to like set up the different I guess you could say countries, the different parts of the world that she has introduced. I'm already almost done with like the last book in the series, but this one, Sovereign Sacrifice, is the best written one in my opinion. This book really does reference some important plot story that was talked about in Heir Awakens, so you definitely would be lost if you start reading this series before like the prequel series. I mean, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the references to the previous series because I really enjoyed it. I feel like the author is really relying on the previous series and like Easter eggs and references to that older series to kind of make this one seem a little bit better. Like I feel like this story can't really stand on its own, which is kind of unfortunate. Time travel and like alternate universes were also like introduced, and that is so very different from like the original like elemental battles that were had in like the first series. So it kind of feels like a completely different thing despite it being set in the same world, not even like 20 years after that. It just feels very different. I feel like she could have condensed a lot of stuff and removed some plot points that I personally didn't care about. This could have been all put into like one really long kind of like tome, and the romance is pretty boring. I don't hate it or anything, and I don't think the love interest is like a terrible person. He's just incredibly bland, and it's so strange because our main character has a lot of great female friendships and relationships, and she has way more chemistry with any other like woman than she's ever had with this man. He's just boring and bland, and I hate how much time our main character like dedicates to thinking about this guy and like making sure he's safe and all this kind of stuff. Like I don't care. So yeah, that also kind of puts a damper on this entire series. After that, I finished Escaping from Houdini by Carrie Maniscalco. I listened to this on audiobook. This is also a series that like I had higher hopes for. That kind of disappointed me because this book series, like you see it like everywhere on Bookstagram. But anyways, the series is about a woman named Audrey Rose, and she really wants to be like a forensic scientist. She wants to like perform autopsies on people, but this being the Victorian era, she's not really allowed to. She's a woman. It's not like proper for her. Fortunately, her uncle is with like already has a position within the field, so she has like some privileges. The story is some way connected to Harry Houdini, but you could have like fooled me. Like I would often forget that he's even a character because he was so irrelevant. Like they would mention him every like once in a while, and I feel like the author just needed some sort of like figure, some historical figure to like throw in, and Harry Houdini was like the best bet. I mentioned that the series was kind of disappointing. The romance was always like pushed as like the best thing of the series, and I'm not picky about romance, but I just like don't care but I thought maybe I'll give this one a shot and like maybe I'll really enjoy the romance. But I had a really bad reaction to like the love interest's like first appearance in the very first book. At this point, the love interest is like okay. Actually, another love interest was like introduced in this book, and oh my god, he was like eons better, so much more intriguing, so much more like I just had more fun reading when he was with our main character Audrey than her love interest Thomas. Like, I don't care about Thomas, he's like irrelevant to me. Like, I'm glad you like him, but like I don't care about him. But the new love interest was he was just so interesting and like cool to read from. So I'm kind of mad that she could have had like a better feature with someone else. I did think that this book was a little more, had a bit more like descriptions when it came to like the autopsy parts, right? Because a lot of people be dying. And I thought they were really well done. I thought they were really creepy and cool. I honestly think the author just wanted to put Audrey on this like Carnival cruise ship setting and was like, who would fit this environment and is also like a like historical figure. And she went for Harry Houdini, which could have been cool because she's had some pretty good choices so far. She had Jack the Ripper in the first book, Dracula mentioned in the second book, and then this third book was Harry Houdini, which I've never really seen used before in terms of like a fictional sense. He was barely there, so that's kind of weird choice. I don't know. So yeah, the best part and the worst part of this book was this new love interest that was introduced, but he's not like, there's like no way that he was ever going to be like the actual love interest, like the end game love interest, which is shitty. But okay. So after that, I listened to Star Wars Dooku Jedi Lost by Cavan Scott, I believe was the author. I believe this is the first book in the like expanded like official Star Wars literary world. I know they've had like some other Star Wars novels, but like officially this new like timeline that they've established, this is the first one. Or this takes place earliest in the timeline, but correct me if I'm wrong. This book obviously features Count Dooku and Ventress, and Dooku is basically showing Ventress like his like origin story, like where he started out, the fact that he was Yoda's like Padawan and kind of what made him go dark side. I think this book was originally done as an audiobook and then they kind of put it into like a published novel, but I'm pretty sure the novel is like written as like a screenplay almost, just like straight dialogue and maybe some descriptors. So I would really recommend listening to it on audiobook because there's a full cast, like a full cast. There is sound effects, there's like blaster noises and like saber noises, and then there's also like beautiful like the score is also put in. My favorite Star Wars score is Across the Stars, and that played many times. It did start to feel like it was dragging a little bit because there were a lot of instances where Dooku was like wronged by the Jedi Order, or he thought the Jedi Order was not behaving the way it should be, and like we got it, like I got it, like the Jedi Order is like ain't shit, like they're not the greatest, period. I get it, but can we like move on? Like I don't need like example after example after example after example of how shit some of the Jedi are. So I wish we kind of got to like the point faster, because I, as a person who's seen the movies at least once, and I'm assuming if you're reading the books that you probably have watched the films at least once, that you already know that the Jedi and the Senate are not the best. I didn't need to be told multiple times through like multiple instances. Like I got it, let's like move it along. But that's pretty much my only complaint. It kind of just drags a little bit, but if you just want to be like in this world longer, then I guess you probably wouldn't have a problem with it. It's fine. Just listen to it on an audiobook and you'll love it probably, or you'll enjoy it at least. After that, I read The Hollow Crown by Jeff Wheeler. This is the fourth book in the King Fountain series. So this is a hard book to explain like plot wise because Jeff Wheeler has his whole like entire like universe. The King Fountain series was originally like a trilogy, and then I think he expanded it into 6 books in total. There's a huge time gap between books 3 and 4, so much so that the like original character from book 1 has like grown up and he's much older and he has like a really good place in like the kingdom, and we're following a new generation kind of. The OG characters like still make appearances, but we're following someone else. Yes, it's book 4 in the series, but like it's like a whole new like arc kind of. The King Fountain series follows the aftermath of this like huge kind of warring period inspired by like War of the Roses, which also inspired Game of Thrones. So I wouldn't say Game of Thrones vibes, but there's a lot of political intrigue. There's a lot of like warring like factions, I guess. In the first book, we follow a young boy named Owen, and Owen's father was like a duke, and at the time there was this like uprising against the king, and Owen's father didn't like immediately pick a side. He wanted to see like where his best bets were, but the king eventually won the war, and the king was very cross with Owen's father for not like helping him out when he needed it. So as punishment, the king took Owen as like a political prisoner to be raised by the king, and the king's not a very nice man. And that's pretty much like the first original 3 books in the series. Book 4, The Hollow Crown, Owen still makes an appearance, but again we follow someone else, and we follow kind of the aftermath of that, and then there's new like political enemies. In this new trilogy, we follow a young woman, and she has gotten a vision from like the higher entity that is like prayed to in this world. It's not like a god figure per se, it's more like a force of nature that they pray to, called the King Fountain. And the King Fountain has told our main character that she is to be like this warrior to like protect the king and queen. She's a woman, and women aren't allowed to be knights. She has to like fight in secret. She has to like protect her identity. She has to masquerade as like a man, which I love that trope. I will never get tired of that trope. People in this world are also blessed by this King Fountain. For example, some people have like premonitions. I believe there's one person who's blessed by the fountain to like make themselves like invisible. Jeff Wheeler is like honestly hands down one of my favorite like fantasy authors, and the fact that he's not like read a lot is really sad. I think he's fantastic. He writes a lot of like clean fantasy, so like along the lines of like Tamora Pierce, where yeah, he'll reference like death and like sex, but he won't like go into like detail about it. Most of his characters start out fairly young to like teen, but I would say like his books have more of like that general audience feel where like anyone can enjoy it, very much like, or how like Marvel movies are kind of like intended for every audience member, as opposed to like something like Dora the Explorer, which is like intended for children. Does that make sense? So it's very much like a general audience feel. And this whole King Fountain series has like huge like King Arthur references, like motifs and like inspiration. So if you're like a huge Arthurian fantasy lover, it's here, and it's pretty obvious, and it's pretty in your face. After that, I listened to All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This is a sci-fi novella that's pretty popular. So this series follows this like security robot that can be like purchased and used for like security, like detail and protection, and they're gender neutral. But this particular robot has kind of hijacked or hacked into their computer systems so that they don't have to follow orders. They don't have to do everything that is told to them. And I think the fun part of this book is that sci-fi as a genre has always assumed that if like robots get like sentience, that they will like turn evil and like kill humans, but Murderbot has no interest in like even interacting with humans. Murderbot is very awkward around humans. All they want to do is like sit in their room and like watch the equivalent of like soap operas all day. So yeah, it's really fun, it's really witty, it's really quick, and I think it's great for people who want to get into sci-fi but like don't know where to start. This is not very long, and it reads more into like personal relationships, I guess. Like there is some like action-y parts, but for the most part it's like Murderbot trying to like have good relationships with like the people that they are supposed to protect. I think it's fine and entertaining, and it's fun, and it's silly, and it's witty, and it's like lighthearted. After that, I read 10 Blind Dates by Ashley Elston. This is a YA contemporary like holiday book. So our main character in this book has recently been dumped like right before the holidays, and she goes to visit her extended family in is it Baton Rouge or Shreveport, Louisiana. Her family kind of sets her up on like 10 blind dates to like cheer her up, to like do something so she's just not like moping around during the holidays. And honestly, like this could be like a really great fun rom-com. And Netflix actually cared about doing things in the vein of To All the Boys I Loved Before, which was like a huge hit. I don't know why they don't put that much effort into like the other IPs that they get. This could be really fun and entertaining and great and like a way better holiday movie than like the other ones that they have. I also think the teens here are like, I mean, I'm not a teenager anymore. I think the teens here are fairly relatable. Like they do go to parties and like they do like underage like drinking and stuff, but I feel like the way it was done here is a little more authentic as opposed to like other books I've read where like the teenagers are like having like tons and tons of sex and doing hard drugs and then like being passed out on the floor, waking up in their vomit, and like I'm sure there are some teenagers with that behavior, but I don't think it's as common as like adults might think it is. But I could be wrong. Feel free to like correct me if I'm wrong. They don't speak like adults in this book either. They speak like teens. I think the family relationships were really fun to read about too. Yes, she's going on a lot of dates, but a huge part of the story, she's thinking about the relationship that she has with her extended family and how she doesn't spend a lot of time with them. And I love like family centric books. They're like one of my favorite like contemporary stories. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. This was really cute and really fun. And if you want a holiday book to read for the holidays, whenever you want to read it, I'd recommend this one. And the last book that I read for 2020 was Surreal by Garth Nix. Surreal is the second book in the Abortion series. It takes place after Surreal. In Surreal, we follow a necromancer whose father kind of goes missing and she has to go on this huge adventure to find him. This book, however, takes place sometime after that. Surreal was kind of strange for me because it doesn't really follow a direct plot from Surreal. It follows different characters, though the characters from Surreal are mentioned. It doesn't feel like a direct sequel. It feels like you could read Surreal and like be done with the series if you have no interest to keep reading. I continued reading because I thought it was like what's gonna happen next, but like some time has passed since Surreal, and I feel like that's such a weird place to put like a time jump from book 1 to book 2. In this book we follow two different characters. We follow a girl named Surreal who's grown up among these group of people called the Claire, which essentially have this like prophetic sight. She's gotten much older and she still doesn't have the sight, and most people get it when they're like most women get it when they're like 9 or 10, and she's, by the time the story really kicks off, she's like 16 or 17 and she still doesn't have it, so she feels pretty bad about that. And then we also follow a boy who's the son of a king, and he has duties that he's not super comfortable with, that he doesn't think he's prepared for. I honestly didn't care for his perspective. I thought he was boring. I cared more about Layla and her story. One of our characters does contemplate suicide, and they almost do it. So just letting you know, for trigger warnings. I know that this series is like really well loved, but if I had known what the plot of this story was and like when it takes place, I probably would not have continued because Surreal did end on a good note. I just assumed that this book was going to pick up not like immediately afterwards, but like a year maybe, I don't know, but this takes place like a generation after, and completely different threats, different main characters. Not really interested in like anything that was given to me. I will say though that the best thing about this book is that the magic is a bit more explained. In Surreal, it really wasn't explained that much. We kind of had to like guess and use like tons of context clues, or at least I did. In this book, the characters are a little bit more helpful in explaining charter magic and free magic. This took me like the entire month to get through. This was a fine story. I just couldn't give it high marks because I had different expectations. That could have been my own fault, but yeah, I just didn't love it. It was fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Just not my favorite. And that concludes my last wrap up for the year of 2020. I know we're already in 2021, but you know what I mean. I would love to hear your thoughts on anything I've said. I'll link my socials down below. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.